Awesome. So, hello everyone. Today we have with us Abbas Sheikh, who's been in crypto for a while and has some brilliant thoughts on how Bitcoin is stored energy, and there is an entire context behind it. So today we are here to learn about how to look at Bitcoin as some kind of a storage of energy and how civilization would be completely different if we looked at it with this scale. The center concept here is called Kardashev Scale, and we will see what the scale means, right? So let me just quickly ask you, Abbas, what's your background here? And it would be amazing if you can introduce yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here. So my name is Abbas. I am actually a full-time marketing professional. So I work with brands and helping them run their social media presence, ad campaigns, all sorts of things. Been doing this for around 5-6 years now, and started out writing content. And there's a bit of a context here that I started writing content 6-7 years ago about deep space tech, travel, in-planet travel, all sorts of things linked to space and tech, and then slowly transition towards writing about marketing. And I realized that, hey, if I could write about space, tech, and marketing, I can also write about brands, and I can link those two and probably help brands in their marketing. And that's how I slowly transitioned this, my passion for learning about deep space to then making it a full-time profession of sorts. And then from there, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been writing about, or thinking about at least, deep space in many ways. And in the last 2 or 3 years, especially, I've been closely linked with understanding more about financial assets, how the system works, crypto, NFTs, all sorts of things in the Web3 space. And I found a very interesting link between these two, and that's what this discussion is largely going to be about. That how did my passion for space and tech, which you wouldn't imagine has a link to Bitcoin or crypto in any way, would come together. So yeah, that's been a bit of my journey.
That's amazing. Uh, you also have a newsletter on Substack, and that's super interesting. What we'll do is we'll link it in the description below, so you can check out Abbas's newsletter. And I think it's really valuable. What he's written there, it's very simple to understand, but gives a great background into something that's this transitional. I think let's start with the thing that ties all of these things, which is money, right? So if I were to go to the basics here, how do you look at money? Like what do you think is money?
Yeah. I think in very simple terms, without taking it too deep, right? It's simply, in the current form, it's an accounting measure. That's what anybody will explain to you, that you account for what has been stored as energy technically, because you spend time working on something, building something, could be an employment, could be a freelance opportunity or a business. And then you store that energy, and then you can later use it as capital. And suddenly money has now allowed us to leverage all of our work that we stored in whatever form, to maybe 10x, 100x, and that's all the investments we make potentially, right? So that's the kind of potential money has in the accounting format, at least. How I look at it is, at least the way it transitioned from multiple formats. We think that money is only being trying to revolutionize today, but it's been in the making for a long time. And it's fairly a common knowledge that we started from barter to precious metals to paper money, because accounting was a lot easier and divisible. And then we move to plastic money. People tend to forget about the plastic money interface in between. We had that bit as well, where people are very skeptical about plastic money, right? And then we moved on to crypto assets now. That's a discussion about how cryptographically you can verify all sorts of things. And before that, we also had numbers being exchanged. So digital numbers being exchanged from one place to another. Technically, no money was flowing inside out. It was just numbers. It was just a verification that's saying that, hey, I can make sure that the money has moved by changing this number. So that's my measure and understanding of what money looked like for the longest time. But times are changing right now. So yeah.
Okay, that's an amazing, great, probably the shortest intro of money that I've ever heard. It was really packed well. Uh, just to take this a little bit personal, like when you first heard about Bitcoin or read about Bitcoin and came across this new crazy magic internet money, what was your reaction, and how do you look at it now?
So I think, unlike many people which would think of it as either very extreme, either very positive or extremely disruptive to the industry or something pretty bad or scammy, right? My reaction was pretty abysmal. It was pretty normal. I was very indifferent to it. Maybe because I didn't have a direct use case for it, or I didn't have much involvement in the financial side of it, because I cared less about that space. It was long ago, right? So the only impact I had with hearing about Bitcoin was, okay, that sounds kind of cool, but there was also this question of what is it? Is it something physical? Because that's what you tend to think, and that was my immediate reaction. But that was the cap of it. So I had no way of thinking that, hey, it's probably bad or good. I just thought, okay, it's something. Maybe I'll eventually get to it. But I eventually did get to it, but after a fairly long time. So that was my first reaction of Bitcoin.
And what how have your thoughts developed? Let's say, over a period of time, you've used it, and you've seen various narratives being floated around. We've probably this is what will link us to what you're going to talk about next, which is a Kardashev scale. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but what is, if I were to say, what is Bitcoin in your mind right now?
Yeah. So I think if I had to add a small bit to what got my attention to Bitcoin was largely the volatility of it. And the volatility has kind of been a pro and a con for Bitcoin because it makes a lot of noise, right? If Bitcoin was not as volatile as it is, we wouldn't know about it. I wouldn't know about it. But because it was or it is, I get to hear about it almost every day of my life where I was not aware about these things. So that was my initial bit. And from there, I transitioned to understanding about, I think my first interactions with understanding more in depth about Bitcoin came from a lot of these people that are already in the space. So Anthony Pompliano, Nick Carter, Michael Saylor, all sorts of all the biggies that speak about the larger impact of Bitcoin and not the price action of it. So that's where my study has largely come from. I do not tend to bother much about what the price is going to be in the next 1 year, 2 year. I'm not too concerned. I'm concerned about what the larger impact is, and these guys fairly break it down pretty well for you. So that was my understanding that, hey, we now have a way of cryptographically verifying money, which was not possible in the past, which was also not possible to account for all the money that's in the world. We do not know how much money supply exactly there is, how much is burned, how much is destroyed, how much is locked up, or how much is held bare. All of those things that we would not be able to verify otherwise can now be verified today because we simply can look up wallets, even if you do not know whose wallet it is. And that was my hook for, hey, now we have an open monetary network that anybody can jump into, check what they're doing or check what others are doing, plug into it and use it for whatever reasons they have to. I think people have various reasons to be a part of a network like Bitcoin. Somebody wants to send money, somebody wants to store money. You could decide what you want to do with it. But if you can plug into an open network without having to go through like a gatekeeper, hey, can you please let me in? That was my initial idea of Bitcoin, at least.
Awesome. I think that's also one of the most comprehensive takes on Bitcoin. Wow. I can imagine why your newsletter sounds so amazing, because your thoughts are super crystallized and very clear. Love that, man. Now, very quickly jumping on to the crux of this interview, which is, let's understand what Kardashev scale is, what are the types of civilizations, and how do you think Bitcoin connects to all of these things? Before we get to understand that part, let's understand what the scale is for listeners that don't know.
Yeah, let's do that. So I wrote about the Kardashev scale, I think in 2016 or 2017 when I first came across it. And I was reading about the Kardashev scale primarily because I was extremely interested into deep space travel and what Elon Musk was doing with all of his SpaceX work. And the initial idea of what the Kardashev scale is, it was written and theorized by an astronomer by the name of Kardashev, I think Nikolai Kardashev. And what he explained was that, hey, the only way for us to potentially bracket down and like categorize civilizations would not be by looking at them and saying, hey, they are fairly advanced, they look advanced, they have tech or not. How do we actually bracket them and in theory put them into brackets and say that, hey, how advanced are these people? And for that, there was one way to do it. There's a way of measuring the amount of energy a civilization uses. And you can do this on Earth as well. Pick any civilization from any time, check how much energy they have been using from the earth and all sorts of things. And based on the energy consumption of the civilization, you can tell how advanced are they, how much tech do they have, how much tech dependency do they have, and how much can they explore, right? If you cannot consume much energy, then you are basically stuck in a place. You're not exploring, you're not growing, you're not tech developed and stuff like that. So what his explanation was is that Kardashev scale is a way of categorizing civilizations based on their energy output and the consumption of their energy. And that is linked to the amount of tech that they've built and how exploratory they are. So there's type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1 is essentially where you are a civilization that consumes the whole energy of the planet itself. So if you are on Earth, we consume all of Earth's energy, biodegradable, natural gas, all sorts of things, geothermal, and we are completely self-sufficient as a species. And you consume all the energy and then use it for space exploration, building products, goods, surviving, all sorts of things, right? Then there's type 2. Type 2 is somebody of a civilization that basically can consume entire star's energy. They're called stellar beings. So they can consume the entire energy of the sun. So that is whichever star is in their solar system. For us, it's the sun. For them, something else. And they can consume all of the energy of this star. And that means they could use the energy in its complete potential, which we cannot, by the way. As humans right now, we use a very small fraction of the sun's energy as solar energy. That's barely nothing. We can only use the max potential of the sun if we are closer to the sun, which is technically harmful to us. We won't be able to make it. But there could be machines and systems that can capture that energy. And if an alien civilization is able to do that, then they are technically invincible in many ways, right? They've been able to build a structure that can collect energy from the sun. So that's where an interesting part comes in. That's called something called the Dyson sphere. A Dyson sphere is a ball-like structure around the sun, capturing all the energy of the sun and sending it back to the planet that needs it. Now, this is a type 2 civilization. This civilization is, yeah, that's a Dyson sphere. And it's exactly of that sort. It could be around encapsulated structure around the sun, or it could be small structures like satellites circulated around the sun, just like how Earth has multiple satellites around the orbit, but this would be completely covered on all sides. And it transfers all the energy back to the civilization. They can use it for exploration, etc. And then we become a bit more advanced. Now we have the sun's energy to be able to use for industrialization on Mars, Mercury, all sorts of places. We set up automated systems, all sorts of things. So we become like almost a stellar civilization. That is, we can move from one solar system to another, or at least move within the solar system. Then there's type 3, we go a bit beyond, we go galactic and stuff like that. It does not matter. Type 3 is a civilization that can consume all sorts of energy. They can go to multiple planets, basically conquer planets. So they are a bit of a conqueror of sorts. So they are not explorers. They conquer planets and then consume energy from them. So they are far more cruel in the sense, if you'd assume that they exist, right? And now where do we fit in this scale? So we as humans or as earthlings, we fit on not even type 1. We are 0.6 as a scale. And it may seem...
When you say 0.6, let's say, what does that mean? Like we are not self-sufficient as of now, or what kind of energies do you categorize? Let's say if there is a solar power, does this mean that we are closer to type 2, or if we are just using coal and natural gas, does this mean that we are not close to 1, 2? How would you categorize this for a layman, let's say?
Yeah, so it's just that, right? It is the minute you start consuming all of the Earth's energy, you are type 1, which we haven't. We have only barely scratched the surface of the Earth's energy. We don't use geothermal to its full extent, which is Earth's energy, right? If we started using that to the fullest potential, that means we are closer to being type 1. So forget about looking at the source of energy. If we just had to account for all the energy that's been created on Earth and not solar. Solar is type 2. Let's exclude solar. Imagine all the energy that's on Earth. If you try and account for what's happening in this 1 year, at least in the last year, you will see we are still 10,000 times away from the actual energy we need to become type 1. So We are at this stage, we need 10,000 more times energy.
Does the scale have to be linear? Like, do we have to
No,
consume all of this natural gas before we go to type 2? No. Or
not really.
what the scale does is, and of course, it categorizes the kind of energy source that we are looking at. But does it also mean we have to quantify the amount of energy generated from this, or can we just move to type 2?
So that's a debate. I think that's a part of a deeper discussion onto what Kardashev was thinking while he theorized this. But largely, his way of saying that was, hey, if we could instead measure the energy consumed by a civilization, we then directly can correlate it to how advanced they are in the tech. For example, if we are consuming the current state of our energy, there's a very minor chance that we'll be able to explore all the planets we want to, all the things that we want to build. But only if we scale that energy upwards can we possibly, explore and become a advanced civilization of sorts. So that was the scale essentially. So yeah, and in that bit of us, that line of becoming type 1, type 2, type 3, we are still lacking in the energy department. Now, when you say type 1, there are multiple things to becoming a type 1 civilization. There's a language needed. You need a type 1 language. You need type 1 connectivity, which we have the two of. Type 1 language, we have English as a type 1 language, though we have fragments of language across the world, but largely we've agreed on this common consensus of translating and interacting with each other on a global level via all sorts of agreements via this language, either English or either binary code, all sorts of things. We can figure out a way to connect globally without having to deal with a lot of issues. We figure out a way to translate as well online. We basically breach that gap of connectivity by bringing all civilizations together, all fragmented civilizations together as one species, right? So you achieve that mark. So we are type 1 language done, check mark. Now we go to something called maybe connectivity. That's the same part of the first one. That is, are we connected as a species? I think Elon best explains this, that we are technically a symbiotic being of sorts. Everybody is connected. We are an organism. All 7 billion people in some way or the other via satellites or phones and stuff like that, we are connected. So we are one being. So you achieve that level of connectivity as well. We've gone beyond phones and interactions like this. So we've done two things. Now the third thing that we are missing, or we were missing, was a type 1 money supply, where all of the money accepted globally is one currency, is one common network, which was missing. For the longest time, we had fragmented networks of, hey, it's your currency, it's my currency. We can agree on a connection saying that, hey, we could mark this against 10 of my currency notes or base notes, and then we'll figure out a trade agreement and all of those things. But largely, it's not one global currency. It's fragmented into multiple nations, etc. And that was missing. That makes it fairly difficult for a civilization to become type 1 or even type 2, because imagine being an interplanetary species and struggling with INR conversion and Euro conversion, right? Pounds conversion. I mean, we cannot even imagine what's going to happen. And crypto assets solve that. Cryptographically verifying an open ledger where money is moved from one place to another solves that issue permanently in many ways. Because now you don't need to be in a particular place to be able to collect the ledger or the note or the entire node of the network with you. You can take a copy of the network and move from basically anywhere to anywhere, and you still have the entire network sitting with you, the entire copy of the network at least. And that is what the connection of the deep space travel, Kardashev scale, and the money supply is
So
essentially.
if I were to look at this in this way, where a lot of people say that Bitcoin's energy consumption is a problem, but the believers on the other side also say that because Bitcoin is consuming so much energy, it is also pushing Earth towards more renewable sources. So consumption per se is not bad. Consumption is actually pushing us higher on the scale that we are talking about right now, right? So consumption has to go up for sure in terms of quantity. What we are looking at is probably the source should not be, minerals or anything that's not readily renewable. If that happens, we probably become a type 2 civilization that's consuming a high amount of power, which means our money is way more secure. We are globally connected. Internet works flawlessly. language barrier goes away anyway with AI that we are looking at right now, and probably one day we'll be able to build the Dyson sphere as well, right? Am I getting this right?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that was a very perfect point that, hey, this whole money or the energy argument is in a way falsified, because if you decide or choose to find the right source for consuming the energy, you technically are a type 2 civilization then. If all of your needs are fulfilled by solar and all sorts of other energy sources, then you technically are. And you basically left your Earth or your planet out of the dependency. You've removed it from the equation.
So probably if Bitcoin pushes people to adopt solar, that's the best part of being here, right? One thing that I have to ask you, okay, what is this? What is this issue with Dogecoin, and why does you seem like you followed Elon Musk quite a bit? I don't know anything about him, rather more than that he builds rockets, he builds cars, and he has a bunch of crazy ideas, and he's super smart, no doubt. But what's this obsession, and why go ahead and support something that's known to be a meme? And is it helping in this in some way, or what do you think he's up to with that?
Yeah, I might have a very controversial stand on this, because I feel like Elon's obsession with Dogecoin or any other coin for that matter has no monetary or financial incentive. I think we can be very clear about that, right? That guy has too much money in other assets, so he does not care about that. It's just a way of saying that, hey, I can promote something that I personally believe in, and people will likely be a part of it because they might see the vision I'm trying to push for too. And it might not be a vision that lasts forever. His vision is fairly malleable in that sense. He does not if it changes, it changes. He doesn't care much about it. The Bitcoin stance changed fairly quickly, right? So you can imagine the Dogecoin stance could change as fast as just that. But my take on that was the Dogecoin journey, or the obsession of Dogecoin by many people and even Elon, is completely fine to an extent, as long as people don't get wrecked. That has to be a condition that people are financially aware about the speculation they make. But the pros to this whole endeavor of sorts is, I see it as, hey, when I as a user look at something like Dogecoin, and I'm not too cryptographically advanced, I'm not a crypto native per se. I don't understand what this cryptography is, or ledger is, or the blockchain is, all sorts of things. For me, the easiest thing to comprehend maybe right now is something like a NFT that looks aesthetically pleasing. Uh, slightly before this, I could have gone for, hey, Dogecoin makes sense because it's a funny coin, it has a meme attached to it. Something like Reddit, which a place where you constantly create meme-based content, you are more likely to understand the use case of a meme-based coin, and that's where all of this also developed into its own entity of sorts. And I see it as a way to bring people into the space. So if I bring 100 people into the space using Dogecoin, which they explored by themselves, I wouldn't promote it to them and then come on the space, but they explored it, they found it, and they came along. Out of 100, maybe 60 get wrecked, maybe 60 learn their lesson and go back and never come into blockchains again for a long time at least. But those 40 that come along, they've learned their valuable lesson and go like, hey, okay, I can stick along for longer. Maybe I'll figure out a way of understanding this better. And if they understand that the tech is more important than the speculation of this asset, they'll figure out a way of winning in this space. And eventually those 60 will come along too, but a lot longer. They'll come maybe 5 years later when the information arbitrage is lost and everybody's aware about, hey, crypto is good. Crypto works if you do your research right, just like any other asset class. And then they stick around for a while. So that's one. But besides that, I also feel like I've made some comments in newsletters as well about, hey, Dogecoin probably makes a lot more sense than fiat money, because even Dogecoin for that matter has a fixed supply rate of, hey, if I'm going to permanently issue X amount of money every year for the rest of my life or the rest of this existence of this coin, I at least know it's going to be 5% per year instead of, hey, this could be 20% per year. I mean, the state's printed 20% of the money supply in this 1 year, 2 years max. That abrupt issuance of money disrupts everything. And technically, people are not so tensed about how much money is in the market, except for when it hits the poor, especially because there's a breach, or there's a small gap between the income you make and the inflation. So if you're richer, the likelihood of the income effect, the inflation affecting your income is very low, right? So you don't care much about it. And that that gap is where people are most affected from. So that's how I see Dogecoin as one means of making sense, possibly, that you onboard people, you have a fixed issuance, as long as nothing is messed up, it's going on. As long as people are not speculating wildly, leveraging and stuff like that, I don't see much of a harm. But I'd still suggest people to go into legitimate projects with a good backing, a team, something is being built, actual utility, all sorts of things. Because eventually the Dogecoin liquidity will dry out, all the Shiba Inu will dry out. We'll see a crunch.
People will lose money. That I think everyone's told these buyers. There have been enough disclaimers and enough people shouting on top of their voice that you should not buy Dogecoin or Shiba Inu. Although the price may go up, it's not. It's a gamble basically.
Yeah.
But one thing now that I have you on board here, and this is for me, this is fascinating because I haven't learned anything about space tech, right? And the connection is fascinating as well. Uh, but I also believe in fundamentally understanding something. So in my mind right now, when we are saying energy, I feel like we are using it as a replaceable word with electricity. Is that how we are seeing this? Is energy is equal to electricity, or is there more to this word energy that we haven't figured out as of? Are we leaving enough space for things that we don't know?
Yeah, we definitely are. Because I mean, our understanding of energy is what most people access or utilize on a daily basis, or think of as storage, right? We use energy to store. We use devices to store energy in the electric format, or electricity in that sense, and then we consume it for various purposes. That's the only understanding of what we have right now, at least in the layman level. But energy could be many things more. I think the Bitcoin utilization of resources and then energy, that is a good link. So when you as a human are consuming, or you spend time on this planet doing all sorts of things, could be like I said earlier on, building businesses, building all sorts of things, being active in the space, or everything, right? You technically are building up, you're using your time to then have something in return, which can then store that energy that you can eventually use. So that's one facet I look at it as. We as humans have collected our resources and skills and abilities to be able to then store it along with the time, and say that, hey, now I can potentially use this in the future. So I see it as whatever we consume for daily use cases, for our devices to function, all sorts of things. That's one side of it, and the other side could be time stored as a resource. And the best way to store time without having to deal with inflation is largely going to be Bitcoin, because it's
I'm,
going to
I'm,
stick
I'm,
around.
I'm just wondering about you know the Dyson sphere that we just checked. The image looked pretty scary to me because if we were to cover the sun with something which captures the energy, basically I'm visualizing a large wire being drawn from there to Earth. I'm just wondering, probably there would be no sunlight, or how would the plants grow? I know the answer is electricity, hydroponics, X, Y, Z, but is there something that we might just be missing? Maybe there is kinetic energy from explosions happening. There are things that maybe we just don't understand. If we build this large Dyson sphere and it's just a nice plug that's sending us only electricity and also preventing everything else that sun may be sending to us, not getting religious or spiritual about it, but there might be, logically there might be things that we don't understand what we are getting from sun right now, which is helping us survive. Is there something here that probably seems like it's missing to my very simplistic logical mind here?
No, definitely. I mean, it's like saying that these are all theories, right? We can build the best theories we potentially can, but then do we know what happens once we get there? No. So how I look at it is that, hey, if we figured out a way to potentially build a structure around a sun, we've largely figured out most of our problems. If we are so exploratory that we've
Yeah.
reached that stage of handling that department, of saying that we need more energy to become like interplanetary, to an extent we go galaxies, then we have figured out a lot of our issues. So that's one way. The other way is, there are bits where we could potentially be like, hey, the sun's energy is one source of energy that makes us type 2. But if you're able to basically replicate the fusion and fission, all of it back on Earth, will largely be able to follow the same principles or use the same type of energies, create the same resources of sorts without having to disrupt our planet much, and then still be able to do all of those things. So technically, on paper, if we follow the same path, but on Earth, we use the same type of energy and we create the same amount of energy, we should be able to do it without having to actually go to the sun. I think, like I said earlier on, the measure here really is how much energy do you need to be able to become an explorer and then a conqueror of sorts, or move from one place to another, and how much tech do you have based on this energy. I think that's the right measure.
Now, based on what you said, I'm visualizing us as being this in this large spaceship that's going across galaxies and using sun as some kind of a source of power to be able to do this without dying, surviving in the universe. If that's a picture, that's amazing. Do you have any idea like how far we are, or any guesstimates, estimates? Anyone has done any research on what kind of time frame are we looking at, being at least being type 2 completely?
No, I don't think we have a scale on what type 1 and type 2 will look like or when that will happen. I don't think there's a measure. Maybe there's somebody who's done research, but largely the part that you spoke about where we could move from one place to another, possibly exploring, uh, the process of doing that would still require us humans to be capable of doing that, right? Or the tech to be capable of doing that. That is being built right now. So there is this company working with NASA. I don't remember the name exactly. I think it's called Space something, but they're building something called torpor stasis. What this means is, if you know how frogs hibernate and all sorts of animals hibernate, they basically go to sleep for 6 months, or at least slow their metabolic activities for 6 months. So NASA has this whole document about how they hope to inject astronauts and cruise ships, and keep like batches of people running a spaceship. For example, 6 people go into hibernation for 6 months by injecting all sorts of things in their body, and 6 people run the ship, and then 6 people are active, being more of a commanding, managing role of sorts. And the alternation keeps happening, and we keep exploring deep space. So there are studies on if this could happen. I'm assuming, hopefully in the next 100 years, but we don't know. We have no.
That would be amazing. I think cryo, or something that's like a hibernation thing, requires its own video. Probably we'll do that later. But I think this is enough information to understand, where how to look at energy. Today, when we talk to people who are looking at Bitcoin and saying, "Hey, energy is a problem. Energy is this, that," we are being very, very short sighted. I think now that I read it on your newsletter, I realize that we are being very short-sighted when we say, "Hey, turn off the electricity button here." That's nothing compared to what the scale that we are talking about here. And probably Elon Musk understands this, and that's why he supports Bitcoin as well. So amazing! Thank you for telling us all of these things. Any closing comments you have for people who may be watching?
Not really. I mean, I just say, I mean, something that people often promote, that, hey, if you want to understand why people so strongly believe. So here's my thesis, right? Don't be ignorant about things, even if it's the worst thing like Dogecoin is absolutely, I would not invest my money into it. I do not believe in the fundamental thesis of what it stands for. I would not put my money over. They've never bought a single Dogecoin. But that does not mean I'm not open to learning about why people have been buying it. And the same follows for people that are non-crypto natives. So if you are actually curious, just don't be ignorant. If people are talking about Bitcoin, you are better off learning about it. Don't invest your money. I often say don't invest your money into anything that's blockchain or NFTs or anything of that sort if you don't believe in it. But at least once you got to look at it, give it your time, and then make that choice. Don't go up straight up and say, like, hey, I'm out of this, irrespective of what happens.
That's amazing. Thank you, man. Thank you for being with us. And everyone should check out his newsletter, which will be in the description.